All right, welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. And today we're going to take a look at binding a skeleton to your model, basically so you can sort of animate that. But to begin with, we're going to take a look at just creating some joints and a skeletal structure for a model. And really that's just the starting point. It's the starting point of all rigging. And it's very complex in a way, but we're going to do a simple method to kind of break it down and just introduce you to, sort of attaching a skeleton to a model. And this is by no means a in-depth tutorial. It's just going to be a quick, synopsis of kind of how to do the process, and then it gets a lot more complex from there. So anyway, let's just sort of take a look at what's going on. I have a model here, and I'm not really planning to articulate the toes or the fingers, so I'm basically just going to create a skeletal structure that is a single pipeline or a single joint system all the way through here, and that's about it. So let's take a look at the overall. Here's the view. I made this model in Mudbox, which by the way is a great program, so if you have Mudbox, go ahead and fool around with that, make yourself a model. This one's sort of high res compared, you don't really want to be using a high res model to sort of animate with and to do this stuff with, but in this case this is just what I'm working with, and this is sort of where I'm at. So anyway, that's that. But if I go into X-ray mode, let's take a look underneath the skin here and see where those bones are. You can see that. I'm going to turn the wireframe off, and you can see the bone system I already have set up here. And if I go to the outliner, we'll take a look in the outliner and say, well, here's our hips joint. And you'll notice that at the very top, hips sort of includes everything in this system. And I did that for a reason on this one, because sometimes when you assign a full body IK, you need to have a hips joint in here, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, if I go on here, I can click onto the spine, and that sort of shows you just where these joints are logically placed: neck, head, skull, nose. If I go to my hips override down here, that lets me choose these hips as individual with individual control. So anyway, that's the special thing about kind of doing this type of rig. And there it is, left up. And a lot of times you would be over here in your outliner quite a bit, so you always want to have sort of everything accessible right here. And another thing about this is that if I were to choose, say, let's roll out everything here. And we're going to be pick walking using the up and down arrow keys a lot. When you're doing joints and stuff like that, your up and down arrow keys are really really important. So let's say I choose this left palm end. I'm going to just kind of work my way up the skeletal structure here by doing my up arrow key. And this sort of lets me pick walk through the joint system all the way up to the hips. If I come down to my right toe end down here and hit the up key, it's going to walk up the joint chain. So anyway, just to be aware of that. Another special thing about setting up bones is that you want to make sure that you're going in the right direction. We're going to be working a lot with the insert joint tool, and when we insert joints, we want to make them go in the correct direction. And you'll notice where the arrows or sort of the points are leading into a specific direction. And that's when you place joints. If I were to click here and start moving downward, the joint would be oriented in that manner. Now, there's a lot to know about joint orientation in local and world space and all that, but to not confuse you, I think what we'll do here is we'll just take a look at a simple setup, and we'll try and work our way through that. So anyway, that's what that's all about. So before we get too far into this, make sure you go over and see Lester Banks all the time, because he always has something new under the Maya tutorials. And if you're getting into rigging, of course you want to have the rigger t-shirt. All right, this is the rigging t-shirt, official. It's approved. It's certified by Lester, so that if you wear this into work, you will be well received. Okay, so go check out Lester. And as well, I want you to go in and take a look at D. Nguyen's Arts channel, because he has a great set of tutorials that go through the whole process of rigging as well. And he does an awesome job of explaining, you know, sort of where all this stuff goes. Really bright guy and a good teacher, and does a great tutorial. So you're going to get a lot from this. You're going to benefit greatly from watching his tutorials over here on a lot of different rigging options and things like that. So anyway, great job there. So let's get to it. I think what we'll do is I'm going to just do a new scene, and I don't need to save that. And we'll take a look at the joint tool real quickly here. I'm going to go into the skeleton right here, and we're going to click on the joint tool and go ahead and just go to the options. And by default, you may want to just hit reset tool, and that's going to reset your tool. And by default, you'll see these are the default settings. Well, these are cool to start out with, but for the moment, we're going to be building some legs. But let's just take a look at what's going on here and make some joints. Normally, you don't make joints in the perspective view because you have no idea of where they're going. I'm just going to click on the in the perspective view a number of different times and hit enter. Well, here's our joint chain, but we really don't know where it's at. I mean, it's all willy-nilly, and you know, we don't really know where those are at. So I'm going to just hit. I'm just going to delete these, and we'll basically be using a lot of the fore-view. So if you go into your fore-view, you're going to be creating a lot of your joints in the side view, the front view, or the top view. Most of the time it's the side view and the top view. More than likely it's always, or a lot of times, it's the side view. So I'm going to go ahead and click in there. And if you hit Y on your keyboard, that'll bring up the tool again as you're in the window. And you'll know you're in your joint tool when you have this back. Okay, so let's just create some. I'm going to click just at some various points here, and I'll hit enter, return. And because I started from the bottom all the way up, my joints are sort of oriented in this manner. Now, if you want to see those a little bit larger, it's best to go over here into your display, come into your animation menu set, and look at your joint size. And we'll just sort of increase that joint size a little bit. All right, I'll stay with that just for the moment because we're just messing around. Anyway, there's our joint. Let's go back into perspective view and come over here and look at that joint. Well, because I started from the bottom up, that's sort of how it played out in terms of, you know, placement. And you know, you'll notice that the joints, as they're going this way, the x-axis is sort of following the joint chain down. So this little red tick goes like that. So anyway, that has a lot to do with orientation and joint orientation, and we need to be particularly aware of that. But for the moment, you know, it gets a little complex. Let's just take a look at creating some bones and using this joint tool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit delete on that. I don't need to save those. And you'll notice I'm in my animation menu shelf here, and I'm also in my menu animation set here. So that's kind of where we want to be. Now, the next step is we should probably just sort of start with a model. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up a file that I had going, my I think it was this plate 1. I'm not going to save that. And this should just have my model in there, and here it is. And I have a mental ray shader at the moment assigned to that. So I think I'll just come back here and let's see if I can select. Let's select from the outliner. I'm going to select my geometry named Bob. And I'm just going to right mouse click and give him like that Lambert 2 so we can see it a little better. Okay, so there it is. We have a basic model, and you know, that's looking okay. A lot of times you might want to go into X-ray mode when you're doing this, and I'm going to hit X-ray mode, and let's look at it in the fore view and press the space bar once in there. And we get, here's the side view, here's our front view, here's our top view. Well, that's great. Let's make some legs real quick with this joint orientation, or this joint tool. I'm going to go ahead and select my, my object there in the side view. And we're going to come to skeleton, and we're going to go to the joint tool, and we're going to go for our options. Now, generally, as a rule of thumb, you want to create your joints with basically orientation set to none. Okay, that's just sort of a rule of thumb for the legs. And so I chose none, and this scale compensate Generally, you want to uncheck that because this scale compensate can mess you up with, taking this model in and out of various programs. So really that scale compensate for the moment until we learn a lot more about it, just leave that unchecked. And there we go. Another thing here is that the bone radius settings should be consistent. You have a short bone length of 1. Well, we should take this long bone length and also set that to 1. And as well, we have a short bone radius of, say, 0.5. We want to take this long bone radius to 0.5 as well. And that just tells Maya to equal things out pretty much. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and come over here and think about placing a leg joint. So I'm going to click once, like where I think that hip joint should be, or that leg, and I'm going to click once on the knee, and I'm going to bring this back to the heel, and then I'm going to come to the ball of the foot and hit click once, and then I'm going to come out here a little bit more, but I'm going to shift click in this case. All right, and that'll keep that in a straight line, sort of those last two joints in a straight line. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And these are really large joints right here, so I'm going to come back into our display, animation, and go to my joint size. And I just want to bring that joint size down quite a bit. All right, well, I'll try and get something that fits the geometry so we can see it. All right, so that's cool. But you'll notice these aren't quite in the right spot. I may want to bring them up a little bit. So I'll go ahead and just do that now. I'll just go ahead and click there and bring that up just a little bit. And now we sort of have a normal joint chain for a hip, or for a leg, excuse me. And they're pointing downwards like they should, and you can kind of see they have a kind of a flow to them. Now, it's always a good idea to put a little bit of bend in here when you're creating this so that the solver later on, when we attach some stuff and do some other things, that the Maya knows that this is the way the bend should be going, or the solver knows this is how the bend should go. And for the moment, I think I'll just stick with that. No big deal. So I'm going to hit return. Now, I'm going to go back into the to the joint tool. I'm just going to hit Y on the keyboard. And now I want to do a spine while I'm here. So I'll just go ahead and click, kind of right above this joint once, and then, put a couple other clicks in here to get a couple of spinal joints going. And through this part of the body, there really isn't that much movement. So I'm just going to click on a long bone there, and then bring one to the neck. Maybe, I might leave one right there, put one right there. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on the keyboard. And there it is. So I have my spine basically. Well, I'm going to come in here and take a look at the neck, and we might want to put like a neck joint in here. And if we want to continue on in this joint chain, like if I were just to click off of there, I'm no longer in my joint tool. But if I come over into the outliner, a lot of times you're going to have to go to your skeleton and go to your joint tool and go ahead and go to your options. And then we're going to click on our last joint, which was this one. So that would be part of joint 6, but let's look at where this is in the hierarchy so far. Essentially we want to be carrying on from joint 11. So if I, activate joint 11, that tells Maya that, hey, continue the series of bones on from here. So that way we don't have to like parent them or something else. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on here once, and then I'm going to click on the top of the head kind of in this area. Might go to the skull up here, and in this case I might come down and go to the mouth. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and hit return, and there it is. I now have a joint chain, and we'll go ahead and keep opening these up in the outliner, and that kind of gives us our joints. So if I use my up arrow key, I can kind of walk through these various joints, and there they are. All right, so that's good. What we'll do is open up joint 1. That's our leg joint. Okay, and there it is. So let's take a look at this now in the perspective view. I'm going to go ahead and hit the space bar, and we'll see where this is in the perspective view. Well, the spine is in the right spot. If I take a look at that, everything in the spine and everything's looking good, but we want to move this leg over because this leg obviously is out of place. So we'll do this in a very straightforward manner. We want to kind of bring the leg over, but we also want to rotate this while it's in a straight line. you know, a lot of times you want to keep this stuff in a straight line, just so that the solver knows what to do. And I usually like to sort of just bring it into place, and you want to keep everything in a straight line. You don't want to rotate it. Like if I were to hit my rotate tool, I don't want to rotate it this way. I don't want to rotate it this way. Usually you're just going to be making, you know, rotations from your axis of you know, that you're aligned with, for lack of a better term. Okay, so anyway, we have that, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and just click on there, and now we'll set the arm in here, and we kind of want to do that from the top. So I'm going to come into the top. We'll come into the top view and make sure that we're in our joint tool. So I'll hit Y on the keyboard, and I'm going to go ahead and click in here. And sometimes you want to be careful where you click, because you don't want to overlap another joint. Like if I click right there, I accidentally sort of activated this joint chain over on joint 1, and we don't want to do that. We want to be, you know, specific. Let's take a look at that in the perspective view, and you can see where I don't want that chosen there. So anyway, that can happen, that if I were to put another joint in here somewhere, like let's say I go back into the top view, and you know, I were to put a joint in here, for example, and maybe here and here, I'm going to go ahead and hit return. Let's go back into the perspective view. You can see where it, you know, it carried on from where I was last selected here. So we don't want to do that. So do a couple of Z's to undo that, and we're good to go. So let's go back into the top view. We'll go into this top view, and I'm going to go into X-ray mode and actually do like bone X-ray too. And we'll go ahead and click, you know, make sure we don't click on this assembly itself. So I'm going to click right here once, and I'm going to click on the elbow once. I'm going to click on the wrist, and I'm going to click on there. And yeah, let's see. Okay, well, sometimes you have to really be aware if you're in your tool or not. I was not in my tool there. So, you know, in this case, you may have to go to skeleton, go to joint tool, and then come back into your joint tool. Well, you know, what we did is we actually set this a little bit incorrectly for the spine. Well, no, we didn't. Well, we did, because we have the spine as an orientation of none. I did not switch this up when we were doing that. So technically, we should be into XYZ orientation, or you could just reset the tool and you'll get that. So we actually wanted to create the spine with the orientation set to XYZ. Okay. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter, because we can correct that all later on anyway, and I'll show you how. So here we go. Let's come back and take a look at the bone radius settings now in our joint tool. They're all off. They went back to, you know, bone length of 30. I'm going to set this back to a bone length of 1, and I'm going to set this long bone radius to 0.5. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I'm on my joint tool here. I'm going to go ahead and click one on the shoulder. I'm going to click one on the, or actually clavicle and the shoulder. I'm going to hold my shift down and just sort of click in some joints here in a nice straight line. That's what holding the shift down while you click joints makes them go in a nice straight line. All right, and I'll go ahead and hit enter. And I may want to go back into my perspective view. And in this perspective view, you can see where they're sitting down here. So we'll go ahead and move those. We'll move those all the way up. So let's move them up into the shoulder here. And I'm going to move this over here a little bit more where it probably normally should be. And there we go. So right now, this is the shoulder clavicle position. This next one down, if I click on my down button, arrow button, I can kind of move that one out to more where it should be. And I'm going to move this one out. We'll kind of bring this one out a little bit. I'm going to click on there. And I'm leaving them in a straight line for the moment, because we're going to rotate these. I'm going to go ahead and just sort of click off of there, go back into a different view, and we're going to look at how to rotate these. Now, in the front view is probably the best way to do this. If you go into the front view and select that joint chain and go into your rotate tool, we're going to use the outside yellow here to sort of bring that into position. That keeps everything in a nice straight line. Maya loves that, okay? The solvers love that. So we'll keep that like that for the moment and not really worry about it. Let's go back into the perspective view and kind of see where it's at. And you can see where it's pretty much there. You know, we could do some more rotations and stuff. We could bring it back a little ways. And we do want to put a little bit of bend in the elbow there. But for the moment, let's look at just sort of, you know, getting these in place here. So we want to keep everything in the arm in a straight position here. As well, you kind of want to keep these in the same position. So I'm going to bring them down a little bit in a straight line. And let's see here. Yeah, they look pretty good. I may want to sort of adjust the display of that and go into animation and go to joint size and sort of bring the joint size down a little bit. That might give me a little bit better look there. And there it is. And I'll go ahead and bring the whole chain back a little bit. So I'm going to come up here and choose the main root there, and we'll bring it back a little bit. And yeah, we'll bring it back a little bit more. And in this case, I may want to come into this one and rotate it. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this a little bit. But let's check and make sure that we're rotating the right axes. In this case, we may want to go to the, if we rotate it, it'll rotate everything in succession. So I'm going to rotate it just a little bit like that. And maybe bring it back a little more. Okay, anyway, you get the idea. It's sort of about positioning it kind of where it should be in the geometry. And in this case, I might want to come to this little end fingertip and bring it down a little bit. So there we go. Now we have basically the structure that we need in order to start mirroring these joints and parenting them, you know, to the overall system. So let's come back into the main perspective view here for a second, and also look at the outliner here. And we're going to be naming these joints, and it's very specific. You know, you want to name these things and know what they are. Right here is my left up leg, okay? And I'm going to name it left up leg. And I'm going to name this next one the left leg. And I'm going to name this one the left foot. Left foot. And then this one is going to be the left, we'll call this the left toe base. And we'll call this last one the left toe end. All right. So now I just sort of established some names for this system down here. And you'll notice the left toe end is right there. We got the left toe base, the left foot, and we got the left leg, and we got the left leg up. All right, that's cool. Now we want to do the same thing to this shoulder joint up here. We're going to call this one the, say, left shoulder. All right, and we're going to name this one the left arm. And we'll name this one the left forearm. And we'll name this one the left, we'll name it left hand. And this one I might want to just call left finger. I don't know. Left finger. And we'll call this one left finger end. Alright. So there we go. We've got all these and they're named. And they're named kind of specifically because we want to be able to search for and replace individual words. So, you know, we're going to be showing you that here in a minute. Anyway, let's go back onto our joints on here on the spine. Let's label this one hips for one, and then we'll just label this one the spine and go down the line and label this one. Actually, what I'll do is probably do a command. I'll probably just copy that one, and then I'll paste it in there and do number 2, and then I'll do a paste and do number 3, and I'll do a paste and do number 4, and so on. Right now, this one sort of is our neck. You can see where there's our neck. So I might want to name this one neck. and then we'll sort of come into this one, and we'll name this one neck 2, or neck 1, excuse me. You want to go in a chronological kind of sequence, and I'll label this one head, and then I'll label this one skull, and we'll label this one the nose, or something like that. Okay, so now we have a logical chain going there. So pretty easy. All right, well, we're almost done. What we want to do is we want to mirror this side over to this side. So in this case, I want to maybe choose the left shoulder, come up into your skeleton, and come down into your mirror joint. And we're going to go ahead and click the option box. And if yours is set by default, you're probably going to be at XY plus behavior. What we want to be at is YZ, because this Y and this Z axis are what we want to mirror over to this side. Okay, so I'm going to search for the word left, and we're going to replace that word left with the word right. Pretty simple. And I'll go ahead and hit mirror. And if all goes well, it'll actually transfer over to that side, and that's cool. All right. We're going to do the same thing for the leg. We'll go to the left leg up, and I'm going to come to skeleton. We're going to go to mirror joint tool, click on mirror joint, and it is going to mirror across the YZ as well. And we're going to search for left, replace with right, hit mirror, and there we go. Okay, so now everything is named, and we don't really have to worry about, you know, recreating all of that again. All right, so here's all of our joints, and everything's looking good. So the next thing we need to do is just parent these legs. Very simply, we're going to take the left leg up, and we're going to take the right leg up. You might want to command select it from over here in the outliner, and we're going to parent that to the hips. So I'm going to go ahead and command select the hips, or control select the hips, and then hit P on the keyboard. And right away you'll notice that that's what happens. It parents those correctly to that joint. So if I go ahead and select hips now, hips is sort of all inclusive of everything in the skeleton. All right. Well, we're going to do the same thing to the left shoulder and the right shoulder. We're going to command select that right shoulder, and we're going to look for our last spinal joint right here, our spine 4. And I'm going to go ahead and command select spine 4, hit P on the keyboard, and it should parent that where that is. So now you can see where it parented it correctly. So great, we're almost ready to go. But what we want to do is we want to have some independent control over the hips down here. And in order to do that, we just need a single joint called the hips override. But right now, since I've already parented these together, it's not quite what we want to do. We want to create that override before we create, you know, this parent to the overall system here. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit a couple of command undos, and we're going to go back to where we were at. And in this case, I want to select this joint specifically to start with. So you may want to go back into your joint tool. Make sure you're in your joint tool. And we are in the joint tool. We'll go to skeleton joint tool. And I want to pick that from the outliner. Maybe that's our spine, our basic, let's see here, that's our hips joint. So we'll go ahead and start from the hips. But what I want to do is I'm going to hit V on the keyboard, and that'll snap to point a one joint, okay? And that's going to be our hips override joint. And you'll notice where it shows up over here in the outliner, it's parented on these hips. So that's pretty good. That's what we want. It's not necessarily a part of the hips. I mean, if I turn this around, you'll see where it's out there. And I don't necessarily want it out there. So I'm going to hit Z and sort of just get rid of that for the moment. And this is what I was talking about, being able to get into the right correct view in order to, you know, set your joints correctly. So in this case, I may want to be in the front view right here, and I might want to be up here like this, and this will tell us specifically to add a joint right here. So I'm still in the joint tool. I'm going to go ahead and I've got hips selected. I'm going to go ahead and just click once on that joint tool like that, and that places a joint for me. So I'll hit enter to confirm that it's there, and you can see where there's our hip joint. And I may want to bring it down a little bit like that. and that way it'll have the right orientation, and it'll sort of be set up correctly. Well, great. Now we want to name this joint hips override. Hips override. All right. And what we want to do is parent these legs to this hips override. So I'm going to go to the legs, and we're going to pick those. We've got our left leg up, and then we should have our right leg up. I'll command select that, and then I'm going to command select that hips override, hit P on the keyboard, and now we're parented correctly there. So even if I choose the hips, it's going to choose the whole system right there. And if I want to choose just the hips to move around, then I can have that hips override. So that's a really cool thing to kind of have in there and know about. Now let's parent these shoulders in there. Let's go choose our left shoulder, command select our right shoulder, and then we're going to command select our spine 4 and go ahead and hit P on the keyboard, and now they're parented correctly. So there we are. All right, well, we've got all of that together. Now the last thing we have to do is parent all of this system, this joint system, to the character. But before we do that, a lot of times what you might want to do is click on this system, come to select the hierarchy, and basically we'll modify that and we'll freeze the transformations. Okay, and then I'm going to choose my hips override, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Select that hierarchy and go to modify freeze transformations, and that just sets everything back to a good default value where we can always reset things if needed. And in this case, I can see where this is going to have some work, so let's fix that really quick in the front view by actually rotating it from the parent root up here. So I'm going to choose that joint. I'm going to bring it down a little bit like that, and in this case I will stay with that because it looks it looks pretty good. I might want to choose this last joint down here and kind of move it down, move it over here and down just a little bit to kind of match the end of that hand. And I really won't know what's happening with that arm until I come over here into the perspective view and see if it's in the right position, and it's not. So I may want to rotate this root joint around again, and it might bring it around like that a little bit. Okay, so anyway, there you go. Now let's bind this. Let's take this entire skeleton, and we'll do the same thing. Since I moved things around right there, I'm going to go ahead and go down to my hierarchy. I'm going to select the hierarchy, and I'm going to modify, and I want to freeze transformations. And I may want to do the same thing for the spine. Let's click on there and come down to hierarchy, and we'll go to modify, freeze transformations. And it's always a good thing to do, freeze your transformations every now and then when you get something. Before we attach this skeleton to the overall model, what we want to do is sort of look at a couple of things. You may want to choose skeleton and go ahead and come down and set this as a preferred angle, just because we know that's kind of what we want to have the angles set at to begin with. So setting that lets us sort of move things around. If I want to, say, take this hips override and move the skeleton there, say I want to take spine 3 and twist it around like that, well, that's all cool, but now everything is all out of whack. So in order to get back to the position where we want to be, go ahead and click on your overall root node, which chooses the entire skeleton, come to your skeleton, and we'll go back to the assume preferred angle. Okay, if I click on that, you'll notice it goes right back to there. If I were to say do something, let's move this head around a little bit, move those head bones, and let's take the spine and maybe move the spine out of whack like that. If you need to get back into the position, you can always right click on this stuff and go to assume preferred angle, and that'll do the same thing for you. Okay, so anyway, there we go. We've got our skeleton, we've got preferred angle, everything's cool. All right, in some cases it may be best to use the automatic joint orientation to sort of orient these joints once everything is kind of set. you'll notice where we have lots of different, there's a lot of different orientation type stuff going on here. And one way to kind of do it automatically is just to select your hips. And as a final stage, come up into your skeleton, and we want to come to the Orient joint, and go ahead and click your options. And we'll just set that at its default of XYZ and kind of leave everything there. And you may want to just reset your tool if needed, and then we'll go for joint orient. And when we do that, we'll notice that a lot of these joints are going to switch up a little bit. Okay, so there it is. I've reoriented the joints, and a lot of them have sort of, well, now they're all out of whack. But let's go back to skeleton and go to assume preferred angle. And anyway, that auto orientation will sort of help you, reorientate joints as well. So anyway, that's just a side note, okay? Sometimes you'll use it, you won't use it all the time. You'll only use it when needed. But anyway, that gets into more advanced stuff, which we'll, cover later. Anyway, just something to know. Now we want to command select our overall geometry and come over to skin, bind skin, and smooth bind. And go ahead and choose your options right here. For the most part, just by default, we'll just go with the default settings just to see what happens. And we'll bind that skin. Okay, so with that skin bound, we can actually test it out. Let's see if this hips override works, and yes, it does. You may want to go back into your regular mode, but there it is. We've got hips. We can kind of bring those, and you can see where it deforms the skeleton. And a lot of times, this is the next stage, is sort of painting the weight value of these joints. And it's the total bane of doing this, this stuff. So anyway, I've bent everything out of shape right there. I can go ahead and maybe select my geometry and maybe go back to skin and go to bind pose. And that's going to reset me at that bind pose when I bound this to the geometry. So that's something to remember. Okay, and you go ahead and play around with everything here. Now you can maybe choose your neck and see what happens there. And you can animate this stuff. I mean, it's not like if you set up a non-complex rig, you can easily sort of just start messing around with doing some various small animation stuff. But really the next step from here on is sort of refining all of these joints, attaching locators, putting in controllers for everything, putting constraints on joints, and you name it. There's a ton of stuff to go on after this, and we would never give this never give this model to an animator thinking it's a complete rig and it's ready to go, because obviously it's not. And really the goal is to make this thing perfect for an animator. That's the pride of being a rigger, is to set these rigs up and be able to deliver a really great rig to the animators. So anyway, that's how it's done, and I hope you learned something. As always, read a book, be a good person, and read and go see other tutorials on rigging, because I'm not all that great at it, but eventually you're going to have to really get a grip on it. So there you go. All right, well, we'll get into more about weight painting and some other things to do in some of the future tutorials, and sort of guide you through the process of how to make this so it doesn't deform so badly after this point. But play around with that and kind of get a grip on what's happening with this this skeletal structure and stuff, and enjoy life. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next one.